All right, so for the next topic, this is not in the book this way. They talk about all of these things, but they don't talk about them in this kind of grouping or picture. I think it's easier to understand it this way. So this is where I'm going to go. I want you to remember HIPCO. The most important direct cause of the extinction of species, and what each of these letters stand for. Hippo with a C. They feel like they should have big C's on their chest or on their head or something to help you remind you. But these are the 6 things that are actually causing issues on the planet. We're losing species. And so what I want to do is go through each one of these, and it would be good for you to know, obviously. So I will go through and talk a little bit about some of these are huge topics that we don't have a lot of time to go over, but we'll take a short stab so at least you're aware of the problems. The Bio 6 class, we spend more time on this and these issues, but for a majors class, I want you still to be aware of these things. So HIPCO stands for habitat destruction, invasive species, or your book calls them introduced species, population growth, pollution, climate change, and over exploitation, which your book does not use. They talk about over harvesting, but a bigger and better term would be over exploitation. So let's go through these real quickly and talk about how their effects are. So we'll start with habitat destruction. This is probably the main cause of where species are going. When there's nowhere else to go, you go extinct. That's all you have. And then if you are in an area and you stay in an area, you have the ecosystem degradation that then lowers the carrying capacity we talked about before, and you have a decline. So here we have some of the major animals that are endangered. You can see we have the Indian tiger. The dark purple is the range they used to have, and the red is where they're found now. That was only 100 years ago, range in 1700, range today for the black rhino. On the bottom, you can see we have the range of the African elephant. And then on the right, even more so, we have the damages, the Asian or Indian elephant. So we're going to talk about this more later too, but what you're going to see is we're getting this cutting up of property into small little islands, and so caused by habitat fragmentation. And so what happens, you get smaller and smaller little lands, and we know for a fact that small islands left alone and separated, everything on that island will go extinct. Those are computer programs that are run, and every single time, given enough time, those go extinct. It'll cut down migration routes and cause other problems with predators and storms and fires. We will talk about all those as we go further. But again, habitat destruction, the number one. And if you're looking over here, you can see habitat fragmentation. This is actually a picture of Southern California, and we're doing that with the housing. You can see the houses going up the hills, and we're leaving the tops of the hills. But we're making it very difficult for organisms, animals, to get across to these other islands. All right, invasive or introduced species. We have lots of them. Some are intentional, some are accidental. 98% of US food supply is provided by intentionally introduced non-native species. So that's what we call crops. We also bring in, as we bring in these foods though, often we bring in things to help control pests. Sometimes it works, sometimes they breed out of control. They don't do what we expect them to do. And then sometimes when they're introduced, that the introduction is accidental. For instance, the red fire ant was one that was accidental. It was brought in, it's in California now, but it was brought in to a nursery here in Southern California, in El Monte, I think it was, but it was brought in on plants. They had shipped some plants, and in the pots and the soil were these ants, and now they are starting to wreak havoc in certain areas. So just to let you know. Okay. Going on with that, Hawaii is the extinction capital of America, the United States. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, at present, about 42% of U.S. species are listed as endangered due to invasive species. So the ones that are listed, over 40% of them, is because there's another species pushing them out. In Hawaii, 95% of them are endangered because of non-native species. It's 503 species. Hawaii has had lots of things introduced. You know, you think about it, you think of Hawaii, people come back from Hawaii, they bring pineapples and macadamia nuts. Neither one of those originated in Hawaii. Those are actually introduced species. And so anyway, so Hawaii is the #1 state. California is the second. Woo-hoo. And we only have 299 species, but we are way ahead of all the other states. And so the question is, why is California doing so poorly? Because California is one of these states you would think that we have lots of national parks and we have people that like nature and get outside. And what it comes down to is we are a huge state, and it's the same reason you live here. One of the reasons is you get in your car, and within an hour I can be at the beach. Probably less than an hour I can be at the beach from where I'm sitting right now. I get in that same car, and in an hour I can be out in the desert. In that same car from where I am now, I can be up in the mountains in an hour. So we have lots and lots of different habitats, which means we have lots and lots of different species. And then unfortunately, that also means we have lots and lots of endangered species. All right, so just to give you one example that your book gives is the kudzu vine from Japan, introduced in the Southeast US for erosion control, and it's taken over the world. Yeah, you can see it. Just this is a building. Here's a car. It releases nitrogen oxide, which creates ozone smoke, so that's increasing in the Southeast. This is just nasty stuff. And it doesn't do a great job of erosion control. This has actually got into Hawaii, into some of the back native areas. And they are now actually lowering people into those jungles to cut this stuff away. That's their job. You know, hey, we're going to drop you off. We'll come pick you up in a couple of days. It is some nasty stuff. And what they're finding, though, is that it'll cover a hillside, and that hillside will get so heavy with this stuff that the whole hillside will just come down. And so this is really some bad stuff in the Southeast. It grows over everything, and Hawaii is really taking an aggressive approach trying to get it removed. All right, and then another one your book talks about, which is local, so I want to talk about that, would be the zebra mussels. These things are also extremely invasive. What you're seeing here in the picture is the bigger one is a California mussel. I'm sorry. This is actually, yeah, California mussel. This is our native mussel. And then we can see the zebra mussels are actually attached to it a lot smaller. And so what's happening is that this guy was introduced into the Great Lakes in boats that would just dump their ballast. And now it is all the way here in California. So it's making a huge impact. It's clogging a bunch of waterways. It actually is pushing out native species. And it turns out now, if you have boats, there are places that you have to be inspected to make sure you don't have zebra mussels. If they know you've been in a different lake that might have them, it'll be searched. They actually have trained dogs. You know, they have drug dogs. They have zebra mussel dogs that'll actually check boats, because this stuff can get in the engines of the boats and not be picked up by a visual inspection. All right. For HIPCO, we also had population growth, the third one. And really here we're talking about human population growth. We're exploding, and as we explode, we are taking over the planet, leaving less and less area for other organisms, and just our carbon footprint, how much resources we use and how much waste we produce is definitely detrimental for most species. All right, pollution. This is another problem. Pesticide pollution is one example. What I'm going to show you is DDT. DDT is now outlawed in the United States, except for under very special circumstances. It's still being used throughout the world as control on mosquitoes, especially areas that have high amounts of malaria. But what you are seeing with with DDT is this biological amplification that it goes up. So what you get is DDT in the zooplankton, which then is eaten by fish, and which is eaten by bigger fish, and then it's eaten by bigger birds. And so what happens is the parts, you can see if you look in the picture, increase, where they become extremely deadly. And it turns out the adults are just kind of sickly. But what happens is, especially in the birds with DDT, is the calcium in their eggshells are very, very thin. And so what would happen is with the parent actually sitting on the egg would actually crush it and lots of die off. So we have stopped using DDT here, but I don't know if you watch the news just within the last month. What has happened is there has been containers, which we assume has DDT and other chemicals in it right off of Catalina Island. They were being dumped there for years. So there was a group that was going to go down there with a submarine and a camera to kind of take a look at what's down there. We've known they're down there for quite a while, but they got hold of a camera, some high sophisticated cameras, and they started spanning down there. And what they thought was probably, hundreds of cans. They realize now is it covers an area the size of the city of San Francisco. They did not have any concept of how big that was. And those, unfortunately, those are metal containers, and metal containers and salt water don't get along. And so they are starting to leak. And then the question is what to do about it. The problem is you can't just pick them up because they fall apart. What do? Do you bury them? Do you try to move them? And the people that did this are long gone. All right, another one is climate change. And this is a huge story in itself. We talk about global warming and climate change. This is probably one of the biggest threats facing us today. And 1/4 to 1/2 of terrestrial animals and plants may be driven to extinction by the end of the century because of this. If we do not do something. And there's lots of agreements. Biden just put us back into the Paris Agreement that is trying to get countries to set limits on how much CO2 we're putting out into the atmosphere. We really have kind of a 10-year window to make a difference on this. And I don't want to be doom and gloom and say you're all going to die, which you are. But what worries me especially is if we don't do this, you're going to see more extreme conditions, more fires, more floods, more of these things. And really what that comes down to is a lesser quality of life for our children and grandchildren. So I'm not saying we're going extinct, but things are going to get worse. And then the last one is over exploitation, which is over hunting, over fishing, over harvesting. I think over harvesting is the word your book uses. And it's all true, is we're using too much. The new key word is sustainability. If we can do things where we take a few, but they can completely increase their numbers and stay healthy, that's okay. But unfortunately, we are just taking with instant profits and not thinking the future. So also has illegal killing. This is a rhino where they killed it just for its horn. Its horn's believed in some countries of medicinal purposes, is an aphrodisiac or helps male impotence, which it doesn't. A horn is nothing more than keratin, which is the same thing your fingernails and hair is made out of. It's a protein. And then you see on the bottom, there's poaching of ivory that was discovered. So you do the math of 2 per elephant, how many elephants have been poached. So that's why ivory is illegal. Pet trades and birds and stuff. My birds, if you ask, I have birds. I don't know where Walter came from, but he was owned by 2 little old ladies back in the day, and I've had him for over 20 years now. And then Moose, my green-winged macaw, is only about 6 years old now, I think it is. But he was hatched here in California in private quarters. I've got pictures and information about him. And then down here on the bottom, this is they're selling fish, and these are big tuna. And again, eating tuna is probably fine, but if we're eating too much of it, that could be a problem if we're over harvesting, so it can't replenish itself. All right, and so what I want you to do or know about, we're not going to use these calculations, but the idea here is population viability analysis decides, will this population survive for the next 10 decades? So it's a way of calculating things. And there's two things you have on here: a minimum viable population. That's the size of the population that will allow it to sustain its numbers. And then we have effective population size based on the breeding potential. So the top one is you're just looking at numbers, and the bottom one is you're really looking at who's breeding and their potential. So the equation I have on the right, I will never make you, I don't want you to memorize it or calculate it, is the effective population size equation. And so what they're doing here is you might have 100 zebras, 60 of them are females, 12 are males, 28 are male bachelors. But when you do the math, the number actually that's important here is that only really there's 40 of them. So even though you have 100 of these guys, which when you're counting them for your minimum viable population, you want to count 100. But really, to get the 100, you're probably going to end up with about 40 of them being the males and female distribution that you actually need. So, all right, and then the last thing on this is extinction. I mentioned that HIPCO is the reasons for extinction, and there are 3 different types of extinctions. And I think I've talked about this before, but there was the background extinctions, there were the mass extinctions, which again we had 5, and now we're at 6. Which is the last one was the anthropogenic. And if I didn't mention it, I'm pretty sure I did, I'll have to go back and look at it, is again, anthropogenic is a mass extinction where all these species are equal to the loss when we lost the dinosaur. The difference with this one is we're being replaced by a single species, and that is us. And again, we do not know what that means. Most biologists will say, hey, it's new, we've never seen it. But we're pretty sure it's not going to be good.